the meeting live and watch recordings of previous council meetings. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and Regulation 33, these video audio files will be retained by council for at least 6 months and made available for viewing live as well as online within 5 days of the scheduled meeting. The written minutes of a meeting, once confirmed, prevail over the video audio recording of the meeting. I welcome councillors, staff and members of the public and declare the meeting open at 2:01. Excuse me, sir, there's a chair outside if you'd like to bring it in. The Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This afternoon we have all councillors present. We have Council's Acting General Manager Ian Pearce, Ms Turvey and Mr Wells, the planner. I request the elected members to indicate whether they have, 1, any interest personally or via a close associate as defined in section 49 of the Local Government Act 1993, or any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct for councillors in any item in the agenda.
Item 3.3.
Thank you.
I have a conflict with item 7.1, Conservation Covenant.
No, sorry.
That's okay. I'll just make note of those. Three. 7.1. Thank you. Ordinary meeting of Council, April 30th, 2019. Could I have a motion, please?
I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held Tuesday the 30th April 2019 be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Somebody to second that? Councillor Browning? Open for discussion.
Mayor, on page 32 of the copy or draft copy or whatever, under questions without notice, it indicates that Councillor Keith Pike left the room at 3:07 p.m. Is there a reason that the question that Councillor Pike asked is not listed?
Generally, under questions without notice, it's not noted, or traditionally with this council, it doesn't mean that council couldn't have a position or change their position or have a different position to that, in that the questions could be noted going forward. But I do note that Councillor Arnold's comment in respect to Mr Smee has been put on here. So are you asking for the question to be noted?
For consistency, if that's okay, I'd prefer to see it there rather than to just have it dismissed altogether and just a note saying that Councillor Pike left the room.
Sure.
If that's permissible, really.
So,
Ongoing, if you're going to be consistent.
yeah, so I'll put that to the council to see if you position on that like now, but we will workshop that as an ongoing thing, like whether or
Yes.
not that's what we
Excellent.
would like to do.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan, what would you like added there?
Could I just, do you need a motion or do you need to just have what should be noted or what I would like to see noted?
Well, you can tell us that and then it could go...
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to see noted that Councillor Pike asked a question with regard to replies from councillors and the matter was discussed.
Replies from councillors.
The question was asked to councillors.
What? Okay, so you want them, well, you want it verbatim, well, basically from the tape?
We'll get it from the tape.
That's not necessary unless it can be just
A summary from the tape?
summary from the tape.
And from
Just a general comment, just to make sure that it was noted that there was a question.
Sure, sorry, there's a little bit going on. I think we're not live streaming, is that right?
Live stream. How many people have said that? Yeah, so I've got it up here live streaming on my phone. Yeah, I've got 4 watching now. Yeah.
So from memory, was that Councillor Pike's concerns about information
Confidentiality.
confidentiality and things being mentioned in the yes.
Yes, I said this question isn't to Ms Turvey and Mr was Pearce was there, and I said it's the rest of your councillors, and I said, can any of you tell me, please, or would you tell me about breaches of privacy confidentiality that have occurred? I've heard information, but one of the most serious ones was the example of the email that was only on council's server. Sure. And that's how I worded it roughly. Okay. That's what I asked.
For a summary of that to be placed in, and maybe Ms Turvey can send that around as to what she's proposing to place in there. Okay, any further comment on the minutes? No, with that alteration, I'll put the minutes, all those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. 2.2 workshop held April 30th 2019, which was a presentation from the Super Destination Action Group and a tutorial in financial reporting from the Chair of the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Audit Panel, Mr Mike Derbyshire. There was a further workshop on the 14th of May. There's an agenda attached that included an East Coast Heritage Museum proposal, expressions of interest from the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Advisory Group, an update from Ian Pearce, the Acting General Manager, and a long briefing from Parks and Wildlife Service in respect to the Freycinet Master Plan, the proposed Tribunal Marina expansion, the Bicheno Gulch / Esplanade project, and the Maria Island Rediscovered project. So, could I have, that's just that council notes this information. Are you satisfied with that? Thank you. Item 3, under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2015, I hereby declare that the Council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda. Could I have a motion, please?
The council now acts as a planning authority at 8 minutes past 2, is it?
Thank you. Right, and Councillor Breeny? It's unanimous, thank you. Item 3.1, DA 2019/82, single dwelling 91 Esplanade, Coles Bay. The recommendation is on page 23. Could I have a motion, please? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'll move pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015 that the application for a new residence DA 2019/82 at 91 Esplanade, Coles Bay, CT 146590/1 be approved subject to the following conditions 1 through to 14.
Oh, yeah. Could I have somebody to second that, please? Arnold? Open for discussion. Councillor Churchill?
Mayor Wisby, I have problems with this proposal I know it's been to us before. That doesn't impact on the current proposal, I know. But I still have difficulty from the point of view of its impact on the the neighbours around it, mostly in respect to its visual impact, its the size and scale of the building. So I certainly have some concerns about it, and I'm not terribly comfortable that it's not going to impact the amenity of the neighbours, especially the neighbour directly to the east.
Any further?
Mayor, is it required that there be for and against discussion?
No.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment, just a general comment. I won't be supporting this motion, mainly because I'm not satisfied that the performance criteria that's been set to deal with clause 12.4.2A3 that provides for a building envelope on the site which forms an acceptable solution in regard to the proposal being outside of that acceptable solution and is subject to 12.4.2P3. Just to state the performance criteria, at 8.9.2 on page 18, it states that the siting and scaling of a dwelling must A, not cause unreasonable loss of amenity by points 1, 2, and the third is overshadowing of an adjoining vacant lot, or 4, visual impacts caused by the apparent scale, bulk or proportions of the dwelling when viewed from an adjoining lot. I understand that there have been amendments to a development application that was presented to us, I think at the last meeting, where this very development has been amended and the roof line has been changed, but it still hasn't been drawn within the building envelope. It still shows that the second building, not dwelling, the shed, is located outside of what would be considered to be a building envelope, an offset. Although I am less concerned about that issue than I am about the fact that the building exceeds or is located in, to a minor extent, but to an extent, outside of the vertical building envelope. And for those reasons, I can't support this application.
Any further? No. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Simons, Arnold, Deputy Mayor Woods, Councillor Pike, against, Councillor Breeny, Browning, Wisby and Churchill. The motion's lost. So as you know, we now need the reasons for refusal. Sorry?
There's a Supreme Court decision, there is a Supreme Court decision around a 4-4 lost process. Or it's not lost. The motion, if I understand it correctly, and Mr Wells may need to clarify this, the motion is not lost, it's in planning, council has failed to make a decision in relation to it. I'm not totally sure that it's lost. Is that... Sorry, I don't mean to. I know it's never been before. I understand that fully, Mayor, but I believe there is now something around that.
It'll need to be tested legally.
Don't mean to make the process more confused than what it is, but I just question whether we have, in fact, whether it's actually a lost decision or whether we have failed to make a decision.
Well, at the end of the day, we've just had a workshop for 3-4 hours or something, and we could have tested that thought by sending it off to lawyers during that period. So as the common thing for this council in the last 4.5 years that I've been a member of the planning authority was it would be regarded as lost. We can test your thoughts going forward.
Okay.
Mr Wells, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, so there was a recent decision, and the tied vote is a non-determination of the application, as per Councillor Arnold's advice. So this was recently tested in the Supreme Court only a couple of months ago. So there need
Okay, Mr Wells?
yes.
Yep.
So there does need to be a positive vote one way or the other, a majority vote one way or the other. A tied vote is a non-determination.
Which leads to what?
It would mean that should the applicant lodge an appeal to the tribunal would be deemed, it'd be a deemed approval, and the tribunal would be bound to issue a permit subject to conditions.
And that Supreme Court judgment went to the tribunal, did it, and that's what the tribunal did as a consequence of that decision?
So the process was the tribunal, Planning Appeal Tribunal heard a matter which was a tied vote. The tribunal formed a view that a tied vote amounted to a refusal. That was overturned by the Supreme Court.
So how come council weren't made aware of this prior to this meeting? 'Cause as I said, we've just workshopped for 4 hours and planning for more than an hour. Interesting. Okay, so at the end of the day, and I mean, I've got nothing in front of me here as mayor, which is sort of pretty disappointing, that supports that, but so what you're saying there, Mr Wells, is that if council go ahead with this and it went to the planning TPC, they would just provide a, what?
The tribunal would issue would require a permit to be issued.
And so would the other party need to be present?
No, not necessarily. So it's a deemed approval because in that case the decision wasn't made within because there was no determination of the matter. The time frame to determine the matter lapsed, which then leads to a situation where it's a deemed approval.
At officer level here rather than TPC? That's my
We go to the
question.
tribunal for that.
So to go to the
It could
TPC
only
then
be
back to officer
confirmed
level?
via an appeal to the tribunal.
So therefore, anybody that made a representation could still appeal the decision through the TPC? So it still has that option open?
Through RIMPAT.
Yes, but if the time frame is lapsed, so the 42 days, if that expires, we're in a deemed approval territory, regardless of what council does today and regardless of any appeal or what any representative might do.
Okay, as I said, it's really disappointing that we're hearing this information here around this table.
Well, I think the Supreme, through the Mayor, the Supreme Court has just reconfirmed the long-standing practice. It was the Supreme Court challenged because it was the result of the tribunal making contrary decisions to normal practice. So the Supreme Court just reaffirmed long-standing understanding that planning, there has to be a determination of every planning application. There's be a positive majority vote one way or the other.
Absolute. Or a simple majority. A simple majority. Okay, so really it comes down to those who have voted, well, either we leave it as it is and it goes through to Tasmania to sort it out, or unless somebody...
Perhaps someone could move a motion to refuse and that motion could be voted on.
Yeah, we could do that if anybody is interested in altering their position.
If I may, Mayor Wisby, I think Yeah, it is disappointing that this hasn't been brought to our attention, and we should be advised of these things if there is such a finding coming through. I'm really disappointed at that. I'm also disappointed with the fact that we are constantly now getting requests for these developments that are unsuitable to the sites that they are being put on. People are choosing to buy lots of ground because developers want to maximise their yield, so the blocks are being smaller and people are now asking to build larger buildings on smaller blocks of ground. And inevitably, the situation that we're facing here tonight is going to continue to be seen again and again. And quite frankly, it puts the planning authority, us, under a lot of pressure to make these decisions. I guess my feeling on this one is that I would like to stick by my position. I'm not asking anyone else to stick by theirs, but I'd like to stick by my position, and if we have to use this as a test, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Take on board your comments. One thing that this has outlined today is the fact that we are an 8 council. So we're going to come up against this quite often, where it's going to be a 4-4, unfortunately, and it has in the last, ever since we've become an 8 council, it's become a real issue with the fact that we're an 8 council. I fully take on board what you were saying, Councillor Churchill, with regards to your position, and with my position, I vaguely remember this coming to us many times on the, you know, if there's no determinant finding like a 4-4 vote or a loss, we have to have reasonable grounds for it to be refused. So that's all. That's all I wanted to say with regards to the 4-4. It's a disappointing situation for us all to be in.
But just to clarify there, it's not about having grounds for the 4-4 supposed lost motion. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you can't have a 4-4 lost. So the grounds are irrelevant for that decision. It's like either we're 5-3 or we go to TPC, is that right?
Well, there is no determination, there is no decision,
So
basically.
therefore it goes to TPC?
Therefore, it will be, yeah,
Yeah.
and it will be determined to be passed, approved, because we haven't made a decision.
If I may, through you, to Acting General Manager Mr. Pearce, and that that approval is going to basically the approval of this DA is going to be determined by the TPC.
Correct. Conditions will be basically, my understanding.
Just to be perfectly 100% correct, that it's the Resource Management and Planning Appeal Tribunal.
And the
They will set
RMPAT,
conditions.
will they set conditions or do they just set the conditions as put here?
I suspect what they would do is issue a statement saying that a permit must be issued, and they will ask any interested parties to work together to prepare a suitable set of conditions, or potentially have a hearing to determine what conditions should be imposed.
Oh, that's quite different. Okay, so there is a further discussion. It's not just this will be stamped and regarded as being, there is an option there for a conversation to occur and for conditions to be modified accordingly.
But that would, that would be my understanding what the likely process would be, a discussion or hearing around conditions.
Okay, so based on that new information, I'm happy for no decisions made or whatever the vote goes, because it's really not a lot different to them doing what they've always done, having a conversation and determining the outcome. So, and I think we need to clarify that also, and I'll leave that to the Acting General Manager to clarify the process going forward. So, if I go back to the vote that was 4-4, so the terminology used then, Mr Pearce, would be, the motion is not,
And lost.
Through the Mayor, I think the only outcome would be just that it's recorded in the minutes, and then the General Manager would need to write to the applicant and to the representatives confirming that the vote was tied. And that section 59, the deemed approval provisions, it would be advising them that we appear to be bound to those.
that's fine, that's the process after the event. I'm
After
talking about the process for the minutes right now. So it would be, the motion was put and voted at 4-4,
Correct.
full stop. Yep, you happy with that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that was easy. On to 3.2. On page 45. Recommendation on page 66.
Where am I?
Yeah,
Oh, good Lord.
I'd like to move the motion that A, pursuant to section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, that the application for subdivision of 54 Holcombe Court, Orford, SA 2019-07, be approved subject to the following conditions, 1 through to 34, with the following amendments. At condition 2, following condition 2A, a condition be inserted 2B to read as per above the recommendation on page 66 as follows. Retention of lots 18, 19, 21 and 22 as one lot with a building envelope located clear of native vegetation. This building envelope must be a restriction on any future title. And the following amendment as well at condition 4, deleting C, D and E.
Do you have all that, Ms. Derby?
I missed the retention of, then I got 18, 19. Just going back in 20. Exactly written. Exactly as such.
Yep. Yep.
Delete that, yeah.
Whilst that's happening, do I have somebody to second? Councillor Simons. Are we right? And you removed C, D and E? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, open for discussion.
Mayor, just to address two very important issues of this subdivision is the stormwater drainage, which has created quite an amount of concern, both for me and for everyone else, including the representatives. And the other issue of a conservation overlay which included swift parrot habitat on this site. I have extensively looked into both a stormwater plan that was presented for council by Brighton City Councillor's expert on stormwater modelling, and it presented quite a scary picture of potential flooding in this catchment. It included flooding of the caravan park, the golf course, Tasman Highway, and the total inadequacy of a lot of the infrastructure downstream from the catchment as it ran from Holcombe Court, through Holcombe Court in fact, and down through the caravan park and across the highway. Those issues are flagged by the modelling report by Brighton Council that they need urgent attention in relation to any major storms that might occur in the future. I think Council's attention should be drawn to that and try to press state roads or state growth in relation to upgrading of the works on Tasman Highway in that location. However, in looking at the consultant's report on the stormwater drainage of this site, they have very carefully looked at the issue of water-sensitive urban design, which is state-of-the-art, supposedly, engineering treatment of stormwater drainage to avoid it having to just go into pipes or into drains and across land. The work that they've done on this, by nature of the design of water-sensitive urban design, has retained generally the stormwater within the subdivision boundary. And that means that that water would normally not enter the flood situation under light rainfall to medium to heavy rainfall situations. But in those 1 in 100 storms, which occur a lot more than one every 100 years now, there will be an amount of flooding. The fact that this catchment, this subdivision, is very close to the bottom end of the catchment of this area, that is Alma Road and another road I can't remember the name of higher up, where most of the water is gathered that floods down in through the caravan park. Because this subdivision is very close to the bottom of the catchment, the water of any major flood event, 1 in a 100 year or above, will be passing through well before the major flood event. I'm not saying that this subdivision won't put water on adjoining blocks. The way that they've treated it with compensating basins is best engineering practice to date. It's not as if they're ignoring it, they're definitely considering it very closely. And I've spoken with technical officers here and others, and as far as they're concerned, this is what is done under these circumstances to alleviate any problems that may occur. I'm quite convinced that stormwater problems are more likely to be occurring on the caravan park, on the highway, on the golf course, in relation to the upper catchment and the way that the infrastructure is not coping with getting rid of the water down beside the caravan park, across the highway and into the river area. The other issue with relation to the biodiversity, I understand that they've removed 3 lots from the original subdivision design and made it into a super lot, if you like, with a defined building envelope, retaining a lot of the swift parrot habitat trees, although not all of them.
1 minute, Mr Breeny, for the 5 minutes.
Thank you. Because there is an attachment to the conditions, which is an offset for these works. By the way, if it could be noted that the attachment is supposed to be annotated as attachment A, as in the conditions. Apparently, according to council's professional officers, this is as good as we can get, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to support this.
I will just say one thing, Madam Mayor, thank you. I think it's a really innovative idea, actually, the drainage and the water catchment on this thing. I was really impressed with this presentation. I will be voting for it as well.
Councillor Arnold?
Thank you. Despite the extensive research that Councillor Brenny has done and related to council, and I do thank him for that, I'm not convinced that the stormwater has been addressed to ensure the protection of not only the neighbours but any future buildings on that subdivision. I note there's been some amendment to the plans which the representatives have not had an opportunity to review, and they may perhaps change their view in relation to the project if they had that opportunity. There are some other issues around biodiversity that concern me as well, which Councillor Brenny has alluded to. But I'm simply not able to support this application today.
Any further comment? No, you can't comment, sorry.
No, I want to just let it be known that the
No,
questions
you-
I've got relate to this.
Yeah, you can't. That's in a different section. We've workshopped this matter for probably 3/4 of an hour this morning because it was so complex, and even at the end of that workshop I was still unsure as to what I was going to vote, because it is a really complex matter and it's becomes a very wet area and a problematic area, and so I was interested to hear what other councillors thought. And yes, as a planning authority, we're supposed to come to the table with, you know, an open mind, and I truly did come to the table with an open mind on this one. And I found it quite difficult to, you know what I mean, like to know which way to go, because sort of knowing the area and seeing it flooded and seeing the issues over the time. And I share the concerns of Councillor Arnold, and I understand what Councillor Brenny is saying too. So I have found this one, I'm not giving away any clues here as to how I'm voting. I'm still working that out actually, but it is a really difficult one, on how to vote on this. So
If I just, I've been right where you're talking about. I've given this one a lot of thought over the last few days. I've really studied it, and it's given me quite a few concerns. I think, in fairness, this Pitt and Sherry report has demonstrated very high levels of practice being put into this. In other words, I think they're going as close to the gold standard or best practice as they possibly can in putting this development there. And I also see the potential for other developments to go around it, which may not have been considered fully in the development of this particular subdivision, but perhaps they don't need to be considered. Those other developments, if they do occur, that have been alluded to, I think they should stand on their own and fit into this current development proposal that's being put there. So, yes, I will support this motion.
comment. I'll put the motion. All those for. Councillor Churchill, Simons, Browning, Pike and Brenny, and against Councillor Arnold, Deputy Mayor Woods and myself. The motion's carried. Thank you for not going 4-4 on there.
Excuse me, please, for coffee.
DA 2019/72, extension 20 Redbill Drive, Vishnu. Councillor Simons is stepping out. Could I have the recommendations on page 108. Could I have a motion, please?
I move that pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, that the application for a new extension, DA, did you get that, Ms. Turvey? Yep, thank you. DA 2019/72 dash 0072 at 20 Red Bill Drive, Bicheno, CT 116723/10 be approved, subject to the following conditions 1 to 16.
16 or
10.
10?
10, sorry, I had the wrong number.
Uh,
Make it
some-
16.
Somebody to second. Councillor Pike. Open for discussion.
Once again, we're faced with the same sort of thing. We're seeing building outside of the building envelope. This is happening all the time. An extension that is probably unsuitable to the size of the lot. It is certainly impacting on the neighbours. It's our duty to assess whether that's significant or not. I've got to say, in this particular case, I will support the motion, but just to point out to the community that this is the sort of challenges that we're facing with nearly every one of these now. Somewhere or other, people have got to start to, or planners have to start to think about what a building envelope really means and how far we can extend these things. We find ourselves extending them a little bit for each one of these developments, and then the next development that goes on in the nearby neighbourhood decides, yes, they can push the envelope, so to speak, a little bit further. And it gets very, very difficult to make decisions that we consider responsible. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any further comment?
No. I'd like to second what Councillor Churchill has just said. We have to start thinking about our discretionary powers being drawn in rather than being widely spread. It's just coming to us far too much to be able to have to make a decision on behalf of people, which really does push the envelope all the time, and the envelope's just going to bust one day. But thank you.
Okay, you put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Vinnie, would you mind advising Councillor Simons come back in, please? Councillor Simons carried unanimous. DA 3.4 DA 2019/32 extension 21 Esplanade East Coles Bay. Could I, recommendation is on page 133. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning.
I'd like to move pursuant to section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, that the application for a new residence, DA 2019-0032 at 21 Esplanade East, Coles Bay, CT 61085/8, be approved subject to the following conditions 1 through to 8.
Browning, are you happy to amend that the application for
New,
an
yes,
extension?
Extension, yes, sorry.
Thank you. Could I have somebody to second that, Councillor Arnold? Open for discussion. Councillor Browning?
I'd just like to reiterate what everyone's saying around the table about building envelopes. And we're just pushing the limit, and if you look at the pictures that we get given of the drone pictures or whatever they are, I mean, it's just becoming more crowded, bigger buildings on smaller lots, and people need to start to, I don't know, think differently. That's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Meg. On page 132, the sewage it's from the representations that were put in against this. Sewage is insufficient. This proposal has, and the answer is, the proposal has been accompanied by a report by a qualified practitioner clarifying that the current system is sufficient and detailing upgrades should they be required. The report recognises that the tank will be built over and specifies that access to the septic tank must be retained under this extension. With the current climate within Coles Bay at the moment, with the septic systems and the lack thereof, I have major concerns, and I was wondering if Mr. Wells could possibly allay some of those concerns with regards to. I know I know that the house is already there and it's already being used, but I just would like to know: is it right that you can build over a septic tank?
Through the mayor, it's certainly not common, but in this case, access to the tank will still be available. So they will still be able to maintain it, pump it out if and when required. And so the consultant practitioner that certified it is happy that that's a suitable outcome in this case, and they're happy to certify it. And our environmental health officer consultant is happy with that report as well.
Mr. Wells, in addition to that too, the report does state there's sufficient soakage trenches on the property once this development goes ahead. So it's not necessarily the actual septic that's the issue, it's the soakage trenches that provides the majority of the issue for underperforming or not performing septic systems. That's the main issue there. So
Yes. And on that note, the proposal is increasing the loadings determined by the number of bedrooms, and that's being retained as is.
I have the same concerns about big houses on little blocks and bigger houses on littler blocks, and it just seems to be the way that everything is at the moment, and but it is a worry, and it's only a little bit, and it's just a little bit, and then the next one wants to do a little bit, and as we've said before, it just seems to go on in respect to not staying within the building envelope. Yeah, I'm not sure where it's going to end, but Councillor Pike?
Yes, if I could bring your attention, thank you, Madam Mayor, to 131, the first issue raised by a component there, or respondent I should say, about the roofing. I understood...
Councillor Pike, can you move your microphone away from you a bit, please? Thank you. You're echoing. You're
I
right.
apologise.
No,
I
you're right.
apologise. Sorry. The scheme differentiates, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Between roofed and non-permeable areas, the site coverage is limited to 25% rates to roofed buildings only. I mean, this whole site, I've been and had a look, is under ceiling, under roof, even though it hasn't got four walls under it. It's really, I'm echoing what everybody's saying around the table here. Too big.
Mayor, if I may, post the workshop we had this morning, I did go back and review these applications in relation to the old planning scheme that we had, and noting all these concerns raised about people pushing the envelope. Of the three house-related applications tonight, this one at 21 Esplanade is the only one that would have been discretionary under the old scheme. So two of the three would have gone through a no permit required type process.
The 1993 scheme.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, on one hand, it might be perceived as people pushing the envelope. I think at the other hand, it's that the rules have actually narrowed. And the particular part that's changed is that the envelope now has this 45-degree incline to it. The previous scheme did not. It was a setback and it was straight up in the air. So this idea of that the scheme has today of pushing the higher elements away from the boundary is what's causing a lot of extra discretionary applications. Now, whether that coincides with an greater increase in building size, I'm not too sure, but certainly the scheme itself has changed.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Brini, Pike.
Yes, I think.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Unanimous.
I'm happy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay. 3.5 AM 2019/01, rezone Sunrise Drive, Foster Street and Fraser Street, Bicheno. The recommendations on page 153. Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that as provided for by the provisions of Section 3 of Schedule 6 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, LUPA, A, pursuant to Section 34(1)B, Planning Scheme Amendment AM 2019/01, be initiated and certified as being in accordance with Sections 30, I think it's O, and 32 of LUPA. 2. Part A, rezone the following from particular purpose zone 1, urban growth zone, to general residential zone. 8 Sunrise Drive, Bicheno, CT 162790/83. 10 Sunrise Drive, Bicheno, CT 162790/82. Part of 9 Burgess Street, Bicheno, CT 169429,502, and adjoining road reservation. Part B, rezone the following from local business zone to general residential zone. Lot 200 Fraser Street, CT 174883/200, located generally opposite 13 to 21 Fraser Street, Bicheno. 2 Foster Street, Bicheno, CT 174883/6, 4 Foster Street, Bicheno, CT 174883/5, and adjoining road reservations. B, pursuant to Section 38 AM 2019/01, be placed on public exhibition for 28 days. C, pursuant to Section 39, if no representations are received during the public exhibition, Council directs the General Manager to advise the Tasmanian Planning Commission in writing that no representations have been received.
Councillor Arnold, just on number B there, you're happy on public exhibition for no less than 21 days? You just missed the no less than.
I did, but I changed it to 28 days, so it'll be
Oh,
placed on
okay.
public exhibition for 28 days.
Okay, thank you. Somebody to second that motion. Councillor Breeny. Open for discussion. No discussion.
Simply rationalising what should be done, because those 3 outliers, those 3 lots that are involved are outliers in what should have been resolved before.
Sure, yep. Okay, move the motion, I'll put the motion, all those in favour? It's unanimous.
No.
Okay, so. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulations 2015, I hereby declare that the Council is no longer acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda.
I'll move that Council no longer acts as a planning authority at 2:55.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Woods. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Okay, public question time. We have a microphone so we can hear. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's not working. So you'll just stand
Shall
up
I
and
yell? Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. My first question relates to the raw water pipeline. As it currently stands, there seem to be 2 sections of pipeline that present a significant eyesore. The floating section in the Prosser River being the first one. Am I correct in my assumption that once that's connected up, it will be weighted and sank and no longer present that? The second one is where the pipeline, as laid at the moment, crosses the beach in the northern extent of the bird sanctuary area. I assumed again that was going to be moved and buried under the pathway there, but looking at it 2 days ago, it looks like the excavation is such that the intended line is in fact over and through that beach section. Can
Oh.
council?
Are we talking about in front of Radar Beach, like there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ah.
At the moment, it looks like it is intended to be over the beach in that area, from both its angle and its height. Can the council
Well,
either
number,
confirm that one with the other or look into it?
we can
know that
say
one.
it is going to be sunk. The
Yep.
pipe will be sunk. The second part, we'll look into that. We'll
Fine.
come back to you.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates to the state of the Prosser catchment dam. I and a number of other people believe that the level of supply in the Prosser dam looks to be lower at the moment than it was last year when Taswater introduced water restrictions. The situation is perhaps more serious this year because, as I understand it, Taswater have managed to make the connection between the upper Prosser and the lower Prosser dams more functional this year. So it looks to me and many other people as if we are actually in a worse water situation than we were last year when restrictions were imposed. Has council had any communication with Taswater about the possibility of restrictions?
I've had communication with Taswater recently, but not about water restrictions. They haven't alerted or announced anything in respect to that. But I can check and report back as to any concerns they may have about water levels and potential restrictions that may come into place. So again, we can report back on that.
Thank you.
Sue Nettlefold. Hello.
I just wondered if we could have perhaps an update on the Solace situation. And the reason I'm raising that is this morning I had a conversation with a Tasso representative who told me that that they are only actually going to be accessing 6% of the water supply that's coming through the pipeline, and that they have a very large desalination vessel coming from Europe somewhere very soon. And that apparently is going to go around the state and be doing all their desalination on top of when the desal plant at Oakhampton Bay can't do everything. They come round and do the top up, so they'll be dealing with all the waters around the coast. Therefore, they're going to be less reliant on the water from the pipeline. And I just wondered, are you aware of that? And also, it's putting a greater burden therefore on the Solace development, and I just wondered how that worked together. Like, what are we dealing with? Because it's obviously a worry to the local community. It always has been this big investment by the council, and how does that fit in?
Thanks, Sue. My understanding is Solace have committed to putting forward a certain amount of money through an MOU towards the cost of the that's before your time, so there was a certain amount of money that Solace agreed to pay towards the line or the water use going forward, and then there's the Tassal contribution. My understanding is that even if Tassal don't use the water, that it will still be paid for by Tassal through the legal documentation that we have in place.
But that still puts quite a burden on Solace, and I just wondered where we're at with Solace.
I
Like,
don't
is it a
think it
reality
does
or-
put. Yeah, it doesn't put burden
Doesn't?
onto Solace.
think so.
No. It's certainly not my understanding that there is any burden on Solace dependent on how much water Tassal use. I think that potentially if this larger vessel's coming down, that's just a Tassal business decision. I have heard about the vessel outside of council, but I think that's just a Tassal business decision.
Can I just make one comment? Just with regards to these these large subdivisions, and also the pressure on parameters in terms of housing, I don't think we should lose sight of what people come here for. And there's a bit of we don't want to shoot the bird that laid the golden egg in a way. if you're thinking about tourism and those sort of things too, people come up here for the experience, and if we cover the place with these large subdivisions, it's something to consider down the track, because there'll be, the more we allow, the more there will be. And I understand council's position in terms of rates, but I think we have to consider that, because the subdivisions in Sydney, for instance, that have been happening out in the western suburbs, they are literally roof to roof. And everybody comes here for the eco experience, and that's a big factor in tourism, and I think it's something that we should keep in the back of our minds. That's all I would say on that.
Thank you. John Hancock. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm addressing the Holcomb Court subdivision with my questions, and Councillor will follow. The original application was received by us as immediate neighbours concerning the subdivision, with a very small number of working days between Easter and Anzac Day for us to compose, receive professional advice and submit our objections by the closing date of May 5th. We managed it. It was very rushed, and now seems the proponent has had almost 3 weeks between that date and now to refresh his application, despite us not having been approached in relation to the amendments he's made to the application you've approved today. I wonder, I won't waste a question there. In the new proposal, they state that water will not enter the properties, which of course is absurd. Water will not stop at the fence line in the event of a flooding of the ponds that they propose to construct. In the original proposal, they said that water would be allowed to flow from the well adjacent to our property on the northern end of their development, across the golf course to the dam. That, for some reason, has been removed, because obviously it's contrary to the Urban Drainage Act, which does not permit people to let water flow onto adjoining property, whether it be a golf course, public road, private land, it doesn't matter. These systems will fail, there's no doubt about that. They're designed, they're not mechanical, they are dug in the ground and pipes go into them. So the water will flow and they will not stop at the fence line, as I've stated. They then produced some figures suggesting that 300 to 500 mil per hour soakage rates, whatever that means. I don't understand that, but they've introduced this and they justify it by saying tests have been done to prove this. They also talk about discovering a rock base at 300 to 400 mils. Once again, there's no evidence to prove where they get this information from. This wasn't in the original proposal, it's in the amended proposal. I note there's a condition in the approval attached from council staff, Mr Wells and his crew, requiring full geotesting, if that's the correct term. I'm not sure whether that's soil testing, in other words, which to this time hasn't been done. If it has been done, it hasn't been proven.
Question, Mr Hancock?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I note there's a condition, they now assert that there's a rock base at 300 to 400 metres. Once again, where is the evidence to prove this? That's my first question.
Okay, the evidence, okay, yep.
Yeah, the evidence around the soil testing, basically, because there's nothing in either of the proposals, there's no documentation to support either of these assertions.
So evidence for soil testing and the rock
Base and the soakage.
Soakage rates.
300 to 500 mil per hour soakage rates.
Sure.
Which is all related to geotesting.
Yeah, okay. So clearly I'll be taking that on notice and sending that information to you.
Secondly, how will the suggestion of ensuring rainwater tanks and stormwater drainage of the restricted lots are policed or be policed to the future by presumably council?
Sorry, something was ringing and vibrating the table and I actually missed that question, so could you just repeat that for me?
In the second submission, they say that overland flow will be restricted by the installation of water tanks, which is obvious.
Yep.
When these water tanks become full and the water is not used or utilised to its fullest extent, that will become then overland water. How will suggestion of ensuring rainwater tanks and stormwater drainage of the residential lots will be policed by council?
Again, we'll take that on notice and send you that answer. Thank you. And Catherine Hancock. Hello.
I know that other subdivisions have gone ahead and council has approved. Council has
Catherine, so
approved
can you move forward a little bit? You just really soft, come towards us. Come this way.
I noticed that other subdivisions have been approved in the area, such as Strawberry Hills and Rebin Road. I do ask, does the council want to be legally burdened with another subdivision with known and documented stormwater issues and flooding issues? We've all heard today about the building envelope. We have now just approved 1,000 square metre lots, which takes away from the attractiveness of being in this area in the first place. Then on top of that, you're spending ratepayer money fixing up what property developers are not doing, are saying that we've got the duck's guts. But when I look at your YouTube of the 30th of April, I note that apparently that particular Rebin Road stormwater infrastructure was supposed to be the duck's guts, gold stamp, and it has failed. Now you have a report that is absolutely stating that they're from Brighton Council for all the flooding, and you've just allowed it to go through. Like, how do you sleep at night time knowing that somebody's property is going to be affected? How do you do this? And why are you voting if you're all sitting there saying, oh, the window of envelope's getting bigger? Well, why aren't you using your rights and your privilege to say, I'm sorry, but that 1,000 should be extended to 1,500 or should be extended to 2,000? It just doesn't seem, instead of complaining about it, be proactive and do something about it.
Just on that matter, we can sit here and we can reject everything that's put in front of us and it'll go to appeal. And we don't get to make the final decision in most cases. People have the right to go to appeal. So we can vote against something and it still gets up. It is a difficult job, what we do here. We have to look at many things and it's complex, but, you know, at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. That is our job, and under certain, there's only certain things we can take into account in respect to planning, and it's possibly not what you think it is as to what we can take into account. They have to be legitimate planning reasons for refusing an application. So it's not that simple, and as I say, the decision we make here can be appealed. Whether we approve something or reject something, they can both be appealed.
Thank you. May I ask, does anybody have the information on the stormwater geotech soil testing report? Has it been done? Has it been deemed as clay? Because if we dig a hole in that corner, it will take 50 minutes to drain away with a bucket of water. So our understanding it is clay soil. I would like to be proven wrong, clearly, in the interest of all the other residents that are neighbouring onto this subdivision. Has there been some sort of soil test that can tell us? Because when I spoke to Pitt and Sherry, I was told that there wasn't a soil test done. I asked the question, if it is clay, will that particular, and this is on the original proposal, and again, we never got the opportunity to look at the second one, and I was told, no, it will not work. So...
Okay, I'll take that on notice too and provide you with that answer, but my understanding is, well, I was told in the workshop today that yes, it was done, so I'll confirm that for you. Thank you. That's it for public question time. Okay, item 5.1, item 5, information reports. They run from page 157 to 188. Are there any comments or questions from those reports?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to just make a comment with regards to the Tribunna Rec Ground upgrades. Many positive thoughts, positive comments came from the people that were up there on Saturday for the first home game, and from myself, it's going to be good for the community, a good positive.
Any further comment? Okay.
Regarding page 174, Development and Compliance Management Report, the table on page 174, animal control, I presume that the numbers on the right-hand column are either year-to-date or 2017-18. I just wondered if there could be a heading in that column.
Month to date and year to date or something like
Year
that.
to date and month,
Yep.
I suppose.
Sure.
It's been
In future.
requested before.
It has been requested before.
No problem. Councillor Browning?
Through the Mayor, can I just ask why we have the Bendigo Bank information? I mean, it's not, is it part of our business? I mean, I don't know as it needs to actually be on the report.
I think it was just part of showing how things are travelling from the opening and progressing through, just to give council and the public an idea on how this agency is travelling month by month. Did you want to say something?
I was just, it's just because we staff it.
Yeah.
Because we staff it, because it is a cost to council to do that.
It's part of that department's
Correct.
staffing requirement.
Okay, so council are happy to receive and note the management reports. Thank you. Page 189, section 24, committees, 6.1, we have the NRM committee minutes, that at the 8th of May. There is a motion there on page 191 that council engage with the Minister for Tourism on the lack of toilet infrastructure across our municipal area with a view of establishing a working group to develop a strategy in relation to siting of infrastructure. So I then referred to the motion tracking document, and it goes back to September last year. Sorry, October 2018, where there was a motion for a review of public toilet facilities where there is an absence on site such as Saltworks Reserve. That was where council was to provide it with a report. So we haven't had that report. Upon reading these minutes, I contacted Jason Jacoby, who is the Director for Crown and Parks. I asked Mr Jacoby what conversation he's had or his department's had in respect to this matter, as a lot of the areas in question are either parks or Crown land. So I'm not supportive of establishing a working group to develop a strategy at the moment, because quite frankly this is a council strategy that needs to be developed. If council are going to request toilets, then chances are we'll be asked to clean those toilets, or parks don't have the staff around to do that. So it's a higher level council matter that I think needs to be addressed, and when I spoke to Mr Jacoby about it, he's more than happy to have that conversation and start that discussion with council. Councillor Arnold.
As the chair of the committee, if I could just clarify, the motion you referred to in October 2018 was out of discussion at NRM, I believe.
Yeah.
But the NRM committee believes that because of the complexity of this and the effect that tourism numbers are having, it is more than a report from council. It needs to be a number of agencies involved, and that's why their initial thoughts were that if we could engage with the Minister for Tourism, we could set up a working group, but not a council working group, an all of agency working group, so that it could be parks, it could be tourism, it could be infrastructure, it could be any government department that has a hand in tourism, or what is currently affecting the lack of infrastructure in the area. So that was the purpose of the motion, and that.
Yeah. But as it's Crown and Parks land, Mr Jacoby is the one that we'd be going to, and he's saying, basically, we need to have this conversation.
Cool.
We don't.
I'm happy with it. I'm happy for that. And as the chair of the of the NRM committee, I'm not asking council to look at this motion at this particular stage. The acting general manager advised our officer, our NRM officer, that there would need to be some investigations around it, and that it could come back to a future council meeting. So with respect, Mayor, that's how I think it should be dealt with today. We just receive these minutes.
Yeah, but we don't endorse that.
We're
Not endorsing that motion.
No.
And the other one there, from Councillor Arnold, is the on the bottom of page 190. It says follow up with Crown Land Services regarding walking track development on unmade road reserves in Swansea. It said Terry reported that he met with Crown Land Services officer in Swansea recently. Crown Land Services advised that if walking tracks were to be developed, they would prefer council to take the lease on the unmade road reserves. Mel advised at this point in time this is not likely given the limited resources available for reserve management. I completely agree with that. Mel will talk to David Tucker about this when David returns. Mel suggested that perhaps the Swansea community could form a working group to drive this project. So, as your chair of the committee, my comment there is, if the community were to drive it, I would think it would have been driven. Crown Land would be giving it to council for the community to drive, and we all know how that can potentially get messy, and in the end, council are left with another area that we need to maintain. So, and possibly the worst thing out of these discussions is somebody goes off and does an awful lot of work, and then we turn around and say, I'm sorry, but we haven't got the money, the resources to manage something like that. So what I'm conscious of is community members giving their time to be then told, no, thank you. Yeah, so that's my concern.
I agree with you. Quite a lot of the NRM matters that happen at agency level. The discussions are at agency before it can actually come back to council. So, but I'll take your point.
So, how then, so we receive these, should we be making a note? Because to receive, we're not making any note there. This is a motion. As an advisory committee, they can't.
Well, I've already got a note of it, as I explained to Councillor Arnold, from another motion.
Yeah.
So I'll just proceed on with that to try and get some discussions, so that we can see where Parks, Crown Land are going, and we can start that process.
But in respect to these minutes though, like to endorse, to just receive this, it's like we've accepted this.
Yep.
We just received them.
You're just receiving
They
it
just
anyway.
received
You're
and
not
noted.
passing anything. It's not, I don't believe that council is actually adopting it, because we haven't voted on it.
I think that, I'm worried about that. Well, no, I'm just worried about that because I don't think it's clear. It's a motion, really, it's a motion that, well, it is, that council engage, and we are council, and we're not agreeing that we engage. So I think it needs to actually have a note on there saying...
Mayor, can I?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because otherwise there is that risk.
Councillor Arnold.
Can I just clarify though around the Section 24? Section 24 committees are required through the guidelines to actually put a report to, if the Section 24 committee wants something done out of a meeting, technically, in due process, the committee is then supposed to have an item placed on the agenda with so in this particular case, it would have been a report from Ms Kelly, who is our officer supporting NRM, that would have given the background to this particular motion. That was the initial process that we were going to go through. However, there, as you've said, there were some concerns around this, and you had a conversation with Mr Jacoby from Parks. As a result of that, the General Manager suggested to Ms Kelly that it should not go, her report with the recommendation should not go on this agenda, which was the natural process that should have happened from these minutes. The Section 24 minutes as they appear here, Council really only has the capacity to receive them. That's it. They're not doing anything else. They're receiving the minutes. And then it's not locking Council into anything because there's been no recommendation from the committee to Council. So the motions that are being picked up out of Section 24 committee minutes are being done incorrectly.
Well,
There should be a report from the officer supporting,
That
or
needs-
from the councillor who sits on the committee.
so that needs to be, therefore, if that's going to be the process is currently messy. If we were just to go past this and just go, okay, we received it, and what happened out of this in 2 years' time? What happened out of this motion in 2 years' time? So I agree that the process on how we do this needs to improve, and we need to make it simpler because most of the people are volunteers. But at the moment, we're pretty busy and we haven't actually sorted that out. So that's
Except
why
that
I'm
it's in the
saying, hold on a moment,
guidelines.
please. So, at the moment, we've got it here, this is a motion that council engage, whatever, okay? We receive the minutes and what?
But if nobody moves it, nobody seconds it, it has of no consequence.
So what have we,
So you just,
receiving.
you just ignore that, you just receive all of the reports.
and so how do the NRM people know, the NRM committee
I've
know
reported that back through the representative of Will Kelly.
through council staff?
Yeah,
So you've
so I
report,
go
and so
back
she
through.
will then
Yep.
report back
Yes.
to
Correct.
the NRM committee as an
Correct.
agenda item. Because that's a completely new
Yeah,
process.
sorry.
And that's what I'm saying, okay? We all need to be on the same page. If the process is changing, we all need to know what the process is. And if that's what
Yep.
you're doing as acting general manager, therefore there is a process.
Yep.
But that process has never been in place before.
Clarification, Mayor, no, yes, it has. The process has always been in the Section 24 guidelines. But we've never done it as a council for the last 4 years, the last term. So we need now to start that process again. We need to do that process properly.
Yep,
But
and that's
anyway,
what I'm talking about.
the situation is that this motion is not part of this particular meeting
This
because
council- this
of
council
the
meeting.
advice provided by the General Manager to our manager in
Yeah,
NRM.
okay, I understand. So you need to write a policy then up, okay? Because if the way
Yeah,
that
the
it's being
process.
done,
The process.
well, if the way it's being done is being changed like this, and I can't say I love it, because in 2 years' time you look back on this and say, what did this mean? Dunno, there's nothing in the minutes to tell us what happened from this matter. And in the past, prior to this, if we received this, then that motion would have been regarded as being accepted by council and go and do it, okay? So at the point of that changing, and we're no longer doing it that way, how do we actually know that in the minutes? And that's where I'm saying it's messy.
And all I'm saying is because it hasn't been moved or seconded,
Yeah,
it has no consequence to the council.
from this point going forward.
No, from any time. Whenever you have any kind of motion that's not moved or seconded, it has no consequence at all. There is no action will come out.
Okay, so we've got 6.2 Tribunal Hall Committee. So we've got motions there. So
Page
how,
199.
how are you dealing with those?
Sorry?
There's motions there, how are you dealing with those?
Page 199. And just 6 first.
190.
9?
Motions here too.
Got one more?
No, they're just internal. Oh, are they? The ones to council.
Fair enough.
They're not actual motions for council, they're motion action tracking.
But
It's not council.
well, the council, so the committees have traditionally been asked to provide their advice in respect to fees and charges.
Okay, and so where is the background information? Where's the expert advice? Where is anything?
That's what I'm asking you, because you're the expert advice person.
The advice would be that they need to actually not just give me a piece of paper that's got this on it, I need more further information than that for it to actually go to council. And it should go as a separate motion on the books.
As a separate agenda item.
As an agenda item.
Hold on a moment, please. So, okay, so when they're sent to you, who's going to pick up and do that then in council?
I don't know, I'll have to look at a new procedure or process for it,
Because,
so that it's automatically picked up.
yeah,
Yep.
because there is no staff person on that committee. There's 2 councillors.
Okay,
There is no staff person. It's sent through to a staff person, being Ms Turvey,
right,
for inclusion, so it needs to be picked up.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, Tribunna Recreation Ground, again there. And
You're okay.
on that item, which is 6.3, the bottom dot point on page 202, it says Steve Davies to identify where at recreation ground would be best to install practice nets for cricket club. Neil Edwards offered to supply mesh for same. So I've got a question. You're Deputy Mayor Woods. You're on that committee, so I think, yeah. So what's this about? Practice nets for the cricket club? Do we know about that?
We don't know, the council doesn't know about that. That's an idea from, or a thought from Steve Davies, who is the cricket club president, I think he is. And that was just a discussion with regards to where and if they can put in new, cricket club practice nets.
Okay.
It would have come to council, no doubt. It was on discussion, like it's just in the new business. It's the same with the 4 tower lights that have been offered to Spring Bay for community possible use at the recreation ground. And Phil Giffard to speak with General Manager to have council engineer to inspect to see if they're suitable. There was another conversation. It's just new business that's been brought up.
Okay, so a proposal will come to council
Absolutely
in
it
respect
will.
to that.
Oh, my word, yes.
Okay.
Just on those minutes, too, if I may, Mayor, I noticed that with the confirmation of the last minutes, they were moved and seconded, and then there was moved and seconded to accept the Treasurer's report, and there's carried on that one, and there's not carried on that one, and then when I looked at it, and I thought, well, and then I got my minutes out from that I received, and there's no carried on the minutes, the original minutes that the committee received, and then there's carried on these ones. So I'm just wondering.
So did you pick up on that and ask them to be revised? Because I assume they were put to the motion, were they?
They were put to the motion, yes, but these have been coming to our Section 24 Committee of Council minutes for years, very much like that, or just like that. So I'm just asking the question, that I've got minutes.
Well, I think you'd know full well that I contacted Jan Sweet and asked her the question. They were moved, they were seconded.
I don't know that you've contacted Jan Sweet.
So that's a pretty basic question. We have to act in accordance with meeting procedures, and in meeting procedures, we have to move second.
Yes.
And put the vote, then put the motion, and the outcome of the motion needs to be put on the minutes.
Yes, that's correct.
So when I saw that, I contacted Miss Jan and asked the question. I texted her to ask the question. It was moved. It was seconded. I assumed it was carried, and she said, "Yeah."
Okay, right. No, it was just a question.
Yeah.
Because my minutes that I have don't state that. But anyway,
So going forward, though, you'll
they-
make sure they do.
absolutely.
I don't know whether you want to correct the minutes, Madam Mayor, but the next meeting is actually at council, not at the recreation.
We can't correct.
Oh, beg your
Yeah,
pardon.
not now.
That's
So that's
fine.
okay. Yeah.
That's noted.
So the council receives and notes the minutes of any Section 24 committee presented.
Before you go ahead, you said going forward, we need a process in relation to how we get these motions out. The process is actually already in the Section 24 guidelines under 4.4. It is the
That's fine, we'll
responsibility of
workshop
the
that.
council representative to write a short report to council after each committee meeting for council's information to be placed on the next ordinary meeting of the council agenda, which was where those motions would be picked up, in my view, and that would provide the advice to the council.
Okay.
Can I recommend that council receives and notes the minutes of the Section 24
that's
committees
don't
as
need to
presented?
move it.
Don't need to do that? Thank you.
Just noted.
So that this matter will be put on a workshop after budget, because budget's more important at the moment than this. And as it was always said, that within 6 months of the new council forming, that we will be reviewing Section 24 committees and the process. Item 7.1, policy 3.3, conservation covenant rebate. Councillor Breeny is leaving the room. Okay. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll move that council endorses the received conservation covenant rebate policy version 2.0 as presented.
Can I just second that? Councillor Browning, open for discussion. Okay, put the motion, all those in favour?
Yes.
It's unanimous, thank you. Councillor Pike, would you mind?
Thank you.
Is carried unanimous. Councillor Breedy. 7.2 on page 207, the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Advisory Group. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning?
I move that council establish a working group to be known as the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Advisory Group. That council approve the attached terms of reference. That council approves the attached terms of reference. 3, that members of the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Advisory Group shall be Glamorgan Spring Bay Council, elected representatives and relevant staff, Mayor Debbie Wisby, Deputy Mayor Jenny Woods, Councillor Keith Breeny, Mel Kelly, Manager NRM, Adrian O'Leary, Manager of Building and Marine Infrastructure, DePeewee Land Management Agencies, Parks and Wildlife Services and Crown Land Services, Marine and Safety Tasmania MAST, Bird Life Tasmania BLT, Tarfish, Jane Wing, Mr John Ryan, Mr Greg Crump and Ms Rosemary Wood, and 4, that the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Advisory Group will remain in place until such time as it has fulfilled the objectives contained within the terms of reference. It is expected that the proposed master plan with associated options will be presented to council within 4 months of the group being formed, at which time the working group will be established.
Disbanded.
Disbanded.
I was in the opposite direction.
I'd gone to sleep.
Sorry, somebody to second that. Councillor Churchill.
Oh dear, dear, dear. God love you.
20 to 4.
Open for Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Mayor. Whilst I will vote for this motion, the process to set up this working group has been less than ideal. And given the discussion we've just had around the processes for Section 24 committee, my comments are probably very opportune. There is no legislative process for the establishment of a working group. The terms of reference were discussed and amended in a workshop and subsequently advertised for expressions of interest for a role on this group. As identified in the agenda, the setting up of any advisory/working group must be endorsed by council. That endorsement cannot happen in a workshop, hence my insistence this matter appear on our public agenda today. If this group was established as a Section 24 special committee, it would give the committee the legal basis of a formally constituted committee of council, with protections such as the need for any working group member to declare a conflict of interest, the need to keep privileged information confidential, the need for appropriate records to be maintained on an historical basis, including minutes, the need for properly constituted meeting procedures and formal notices of meeting, the provision for access to meetings for observers and or members of the public. Section 24 committees are set up for community purposes, and there are precedents within this council of advisory committees similar to this so-called working group. The terms of reference do provide for the preparation of agendas and supporting papers, but there's no provision for a chair or facilitator. I realised last night that there is no provision within the terms of reference for meetings to be held monthly for no more than 2 hours, but without a chair or facilitator, it really will be in danger of a downward spiral into a talk fest with no outcomes. The way to achieve good outcomes would be a properly constituted Section 24 committee with appropriate experts appointed. These professionals or experts in their respective areas or roles could then take submissions from the public and come up with some recommendations for council. There is a danger of enormous reputational damage to not only council, but the community members as well, if we get this wrong. That, in my view, is not due process, nor is it fair and reasonable for volunteers to have to endure. There are a number of public land titles within the greater area, and the land tenure of each title varies, and as such is covered by different legislation with differing management arrangements. It is a complex matter that I believe needs more than a working group. I do, however, want to see this matter settled for the community, so I will support the motion on this occasion, but would place council on notice that any future working groups need to be considered in the context of Section 24 committee status to give proper status to council committees. Thank you.
So, Councillor Arnold, are you looking, do you want to change the words to being established as Section 24 committee?
Well, it's on the record as being a working group, and the terms of reference will need some serious work on them because there is no facilitator, there's no chair, there's nothing in there. I mean, if council was of a mind to change it to a Section 24 to give it a little bit more legal status, if you like, I think that would be the wiser thing to do.
Why don't we do it now?
If you want to handle it that way, Mayor.
Well, you're making these recommendations. We could fix it now if you think there's a better way of doing it. So we're here now. Do it now. I don't think anyone would have any problem with that. We workshopped it. I don't think there'd be any issues. So, Councillor Browning, are you happy for Councillor Arnold to make some suggested changes and Councillor Churchill as the seconder?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You happy with that? So what would you like to change?
Look, in reality, the only thing that I would like to see changed is that it become the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan Section 24 committee. And there needs to be a process within the terms of reference for a facilitator or a chair included to, because if people are going to be giving up their time over the next 3 or 4 months, they need to get some outcomes from their meetings, and that's not going to happen without a chair or a facilitator.
Sure.
So if I may,
Sorry, we're just changing a name. I don't know what we're doing.
Sorry, Councillor Pike, so what it is, it's
I
instead
know.
of being an advisory group, it's a Section 24, which is
I was coming from the volunteer point of view, though, that Councillor Arnold raised. There's still volunteers on Section 24.
Yeah, there is a greater protection. It's more formal. Okay. It's, yeah. So
and if I may, Mayor, to Councillor Pike, the reality is council does not have any legislative process to set up a working group. Mm-hmm. So the only process we can really do is Section 24 Committee of Council to give our volunteers some protection.
Mm-hmm. So, and then basically you just want something in there about setting up the chair or
amend the terms of reference to provide for a chair or facilitator. I don't really mind which, if everybody on the group wants to be on equal status, as long as they've got a facilitator that can run the meetings for them, so the meetings are productive.
In agreement with that? We've got notes on that. Okay, so I'll put the amended motion, like it's a section 24 committee, and that the terms of reference provide for a chair or facilitator
Yeah.
as.
Yeah, excellent.
Yep, okay. So all those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. Okay, 7.3 dog fees. And the motion. The recommendations on page 215.
If I can recommend that pursuant to Section 80 of the Dog Control Act 2000, the dog fees and charges for the 2019-2020 financial year outlined in this report be adopted.
Thank you. And somebody to second that, councillor Simons. Any discussion?
Yes, just a little, if I could
Certainly.
give my reasons for supporting this. I think our fee increases, actually not the increases, but the actual amounts are very reasonable compared to other councils that were provided. I think it just shows that we may have been punching a little bit below our weight. And compliance and regulation is absolutely critical. We need to make sure that it's adequately funded.
And my only comment there is on page 214, halfway down, just for consistency, if we change that date to the 31st of the 7th, 19. Just to make
Oh,
them all.
yes, okay. 290.
30th, not 31st.
Yeah. Okay, no further comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. Item 7.4, changes to food premise regulation and fees. There is a motion. There is a recommendation on page 219. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning.
I'd like to move that council adopt the fee structure detailed in table 2B of this report for the 2019-2020 financial year.
Somebody to second that? Councillor Churchill. Open for discussion. No discussion. All those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. Tracking document. Any comment? Any question?
Not that I can remember.
No?
I guess, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've tapped into it today about the sale of the old community centre. Is there any update on that? Is it still for sale, or has it actually been sold?
The old council chambers?
No, yes, the old community centre, which was the council chambers. It is actually a community centre.
It has got a contract, yes.
It has got a contract.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Settlement
That's-
is in August.
Okay, thanks. For
Excuse
that
me.
update.
Excuse me, I missed that.
Settlement.
Settlement is in August.
Thanks for that update.
The council receives and notes the information contained within the motion tracking document. You all happy with that? Okay, questions without notice.
I was just wondering, does anyone know what's happening with the bridge on Salmons Bend?
Yes, my question as well.
Just thought,
Well,
well,
I drove it
there's,
this morning and I thought I must ring them and see.
there's lots of
Why?
stories going around, but there is, I mean, that's been going, those signs have been there almost 12 months. And it's quite annoying to see that it's completely stopped. It's stopped to the point that the Portaloo's been removed. So, you know, so it's just, nothing's going on. And I think we need,
Shall I find out?
would you please find out what's happening?
Sure.
Yes, that would be great.
I'm pretty informed, but
We best not bring you in here.
Tell me later. Yeah, so,
Tell us later.
just on the,
Can I ask just a question? While you're at it, Mayor, would you please ask them to remove the signage, such as the 40 k's an hour?
No worries.
That's there 24/7.
Okay. Councillors, any further questions? Negative? Okay, so now We'll be moving into confidential items. So I thank you all for attending.
Thank you. For coming. We turn these off now, Angela?
So we're moving, oh sorry, do we need a motion here?
Oh,
Sorry, the
yeah.
council moves into,
I'll move the council moves into closed session at 3:45.
and someone need a second? And,
Those in
all those in favour?
God,
It's unanimous.
could we just let them out the door first?
Can you find out why the
Door
signs on
first?